Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. Hi everybody, today I spent an hour with Mr. Marwan Field. He's an expert in construction, but also a property investor, landlord, developer, and has grown a business that is doing some really cool stuff that you can check out on his social medias. So definitely worth the listen. He goes into a lot of detail on various aspects of construction. We talk about modern methods of construction, for example, JCT contracts. He's very passionate, very candid, certainly opinionated, which I think makes for a great interview. And I hope you enjoy it. Do like, share, comment. As always, the bigger this grows, the more places we can go together. Hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Property People. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined with Mr. Marwan Field. Marwan has a finance background, but over recent times has fallen heavily into the property business and primarily as a contractor with his company Byoot, but he's also in his own right a developer, an investor, a landlord, and also a tech startup entrepreneur. I've known Marwan for a few years, and he's been growing and growing from strength to strength. As he says himself, starting out doing lofts and extensions to now what he's doing is large-scale conversions and new build ground-up developments. It's been really, really impressive to watch him grow over the last few years. Thank you very much for joining us today, Marwan.
Thank you so much, Sam. I think I need to record that intro of yours because, I've never been able to talk about all those things in once.
Very good. No, you know what? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on here, because it's worthwhile everybody understanding what you're about, how you've got to where you've got to. And before we go to that end of your journey and your story and some of the insights that I know that you're going to be providing today, I always like to start at the very beginning, which is, who were you at school? Were you this entrepreneurial type character? Were you shy at school? Did you know you're going to be in property? Who was Marwan at high school?
I was trouble. Growing up, I was always one of those kids that knew that rules were there to be broken. And I'm not saying that proudly today because I don't want my son to hear this. But I think that stems entrepreneurial behavior in a certain aspect. And you can either follow the rest of the people and fall in line, or you can be an outlier. And those outliers could be good or bad. So whilst, and I remember this really, really clearly, I always used to dread parents' evening because time and time again, teachers would say to my father, he's a genius. He's so intelligent, but he keeps on acting the fool, or he keeps on getting into trouble. And that was always my downfall, because I would always overstep my boundaries and I would always look for opportunities and look to see how I could leverage things. And I've taken that in every step of life, really, whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's work, whether it's eating, I always overstep the mark. And, growing up, I was really good at mathematics, and I was never a sports guy. I wasn't really into sports, but I was never really good at sports. I was never really good at art, but I was really good mathematically. And it wasn't by coincidence that I did a maths degree. And,
Wow.
I wasn't the best student, but I had a lot of drive. And going through university, going through college, I had little side businesses going on. So during college and university, to get through without getting a student loan per se, I took student loan money to buy cars from Japan, import them into the UK, convert them into UK spec, sell them for a profit, buy another set of cars, and just keep on churning that business, so that I only took a loan in my first year, and then I just started making money to pave my way through university.
Wow.
So that was a really good experience for myself, and I think a lot of gratitude goes to my father, because he knew that I was one that wanted to be independent and want to do my own thing. So he secretly, and I always remember how intelligent this was, knowing that his son didn't like to listen so much, but had an interest for cars. He paid a mechanic to offer me a job to
Wow.
learn about cars. And because the job offer came from somebody, not from my father, I listened to it and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start fixing cars now. And I learned a lot about cars. And my father's mindset was, why do I need to pay a mechanic to service my car or change a tire or do basic, brake pads or whatever it may be? Why don't I get my son to do it? And, whenever there's a problem with a car, he's handy. Similarly, during university, he paid contractors to do extensions for him. So he would say to me, during your university breaks, we have a portfolio of properties in Guildford. And during my sort of where I had half days or days off, I would go and labor on site as a laborer, working for another contractor that my father was funding. And I was keeping an eye on it, and I found an interest in property. And that's really where my property journey started, sort of my sort of second year of university, where I started getting into this. So the second extension he had on one of his houses was, he said, okay, well, you've learned what you need to learn now. Now you're the contractor, you're going to find the tradesman, you're going to manage the project, you're going to deal with building control, and you're going to get things going. And that was just such a, I look at it in hindsight as a wonderful thing when you look at your journey in life. And it was those sort of small incidents that I owe a lot of credit to where I am today to my father. We didn't come from any lavish backgrounds. We didn't come from, my parents came to this country. We shared a 3-bedroom flat as a family of 5 with 2 other families, right?
Wow.
So we've come a long way, and my mum and dad grafted their way and built, a small portfolio that I then took over. But I was managing that, if you like, through my early years career as a banker. I moved to Dubai and worked for one of the biggest banks over there in sales. And I've known my whole life, I'm a people's person. I work well with people. I build relationships. I'm very direct. I'm very frank with people. And those sort of things that I learned from the corporate world, from the business world, from the finance world, as well as my experience in property and entrepreneurship at a small scale, really made me realize one day and said, well, I'm tired of making millions for these banks, and I've got so much potential and there's so much I can do, and I believe in myself, that I decided in 2012 to leave the corporate world and go off on my own and start doing property. And that's where Byoot started. And we learned a lot between myself and my partner, Hussain. We learned a lot of mistakes in construction and where people fall short and what to look out for in a good builder and a bad builder, what pitfalls to look out for in clients and how to price up a job, and learning about planning. And thankfully, over the years, I've become quite a good property expert. And I say that without undermining others in the sector, because there are loads of people in the property world today who say they're property experts, and they sell training and they sell courses and they say JVs and they do all that. And really, if you dig beneath the surfaces, they don't have anything. They're just really good at marketing.
So before we go into all of the stuff from Byoot, especially, which is, you've done some great stuff, and one of the beautiful stuff, one of the beautiful things about construction is you really get to show some awesome before and after photos. You really get to see something tangible, a tangible success. But before we go into that in a bit more detail, because I know there's a lot of questions I've got on that. Being a banker, so tell us a little bit about what you were doing as a banker, because that's quite a broad term. And
it is.
What was it that made you think, there's millions to be made as a bank? Finance is huge and you can make big money quite quickly. What made you wanted to go and start shoveling cement and concrete and sand from one place to the other?
So I'm gonna have to be really candid here, because I have good relationships with a lot of my ex-colleagues and employers. And one of the best parts of my life in banking was the fact that I was really good at sales and I was really good at building relationships. So my main focus was in treasury and asset management sales and dealing with high net worth individuals and developing structured products and meeting people and selling those along. And I was really good at what I did. And I made a lot of money for people by getting them to invest in good structured products, in funds, in bonds, and in various structures. Um, and then I was working in Dubai for a few years. I worked in London for a few years, and I kind of found my calling because I really like banking. I think it's a fantastic sector. I think whilst I'm very good at mathematics, I was never one that was prepared to be an analyst or on the back end. I had to be a
Yeah.
front office, people's facing individual. Allow somebody to structure the deals, let me bring in the deals, and I know how I can close them. Even if it wasn't the best deal for the person, I would close them. And people would invest, and that's one of the things, when you hire people, it's about what book can you bring over. And my book was strong because of me. And I think that was a really good selling tool that I had. Unfortunately, I've been out the game for 10 years, so those relationships move on and they evolve and they develop. But, interestingly, people do reach out, and I go to Dubai every year and I meet up with old colleagues and clients and friends. And it's good to see the different journeys that people have gone on. Thankfully, everybody I've worked with has gone on to be really, really successful. So, I think, my generation, if you like, and people in the banking world I was lucky to be blessed with a good bunch of colleagues.
So it was partly you wanted to come back to the UK from Dubai that you decided to leave the banking
Yeah.
sector.
So yeah, no, I mean, I was working in the UK for about 3 years in banking, and I don't
Just
know, it was
weren't
probably
feeling it.
yeah, it was the culture was different, the style was different. Um, it just wasn't for me. I just couldn't work in the UK with the banking culture that was very different to the banking culture in the Middle East. And whilst I'm the first one, especially now as an employer, I'm one that believes in people putting in those hours and working those long hours. It was I believe in investing in your team and sharing gratitude amongst those around you. UK banking was very cutthroat and very selfish, and unfortunately, it just didn't fit with my ethos and my ethics. So I decided to say, well, I'm not dumb. I know what I'm doing. Let me go and grow this property business that we have. Um, Let me build my own team of builders. Why am I paying
Yeah.
contractors to come and do work for me? Let me build a small team. And I hired 4 guys who were fresh from Romania, didn't speak a word of English. I had to improve my Romanian and they were trying to improve their English. And we started doing some schemes together, very small residential lofts and extensions, HMO sort of stuff. And, it's fit a lot better with me doing that than wearing a suit and tie and jumping on the underground in the wet weather.
Very, very interesting. And you know what? I've got a team of Romanians that I work with in Coventry right now. And to be honest, I just want to find them more work because they are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you started with four guys, and you thought, you know what? I'm going to go out on my own. I've got a little bit of property background from the family, and I want to grow this. And why construction? Because I'm now thinking, having a property finance background myself, you could have gone into the lending business for property. You could have gone into the brokerage business, or equity. Why suddenly the construction? What was the fascination of that side of things?
So I knew that I was actively going to be buying more properties. And so when I started in the property scene, my father had 4 properties, and then he moved to Iraq in 2003. And I sort of took over management of that small portfolio. I started to grow it and refinance assets and use that money to buy more and to buy more. And it got to a stage where, whilst it's great that you're growing your asset pool by buying more assets that can then be HMOs, I wouldn't say greedy the right word, but I was ambitious to say, how can I scale that up a bit more?
Yeah.
And I started buying assets with an opportunity of planning gains. So under PD, do a 6-meter extension, 8-meter extension, loft conversions, split them up into as many rooms as possible, add more bathrooms, and just rent them out to students. And I thought, well, the margins disappear significantly when you buy assets, and property market was really on a high at that time. So buying stuff, paying contractors, and then trying to refinance, there wasn't enough juice in there. So I said,
Yeah.
well, why don't I try and hire my own guys, manage it myself, project manage things, and it will also improve my skill set. And I have an interest in it. I could get into lending, I could get into funding, I could get into JV type business any day of the week. It doesn't excite me more than being able to drive past a building and say, I built that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that for me is the vision of being able to take something from A to Z and being proud of it, really.
And did you label it Byoot off the bat, or did you kind of say, look, let me go and find an investment, I'm going to build it myself, I'm going to get 4 guys? Or was
Yeah.
it from the off the bat, it was kind of like, right, I'm going to have a construction company, and it's going to be these guys, and I'm going to do...
No, not at all. This was just something for me and building my own portfolio. And
Yeah.
I knew, with 4 guys, I could keep them busy. I've got enough properties to keep them busy. And hopefully we finish one and we'll have another one in the background and just keep on churning those guys. And it wasn't until some neighbors of ours saw the lovely work that the guys were doing. They said, well, could you redo our roof for us? And I was like,
Wow.
well, not really interested in doing works for clients, but I understand that you're a bit stuck here. So let's help you out. And then I just thought, well, we provided a complete, because I'm not a builder. And I think that is a major difference, that a lot of people in construction, a lot of people in the property space, to grow, they need a builder. Investors don't necessarily like dealing with builders. Different mentalities, ethics, psyches, education levels, cultural, there's a number of reasons why builders and investors don't connect, but you need each other. And I think what I provided was a bit of a hybrid, because I provided the professionalism and the corporate lifestyle that these people were more used to, but were also able to speak the same language as the people on site. And that really was a game changer. And I thought, well, that's a USP in itself for bridging that gap. And don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily a big fan of dealing with builders myself, but I know how to get away with getting results out of them and how to manage them and manipulate. And even today, I mean, we've got 40 tradesmen working for us in-house, a number of project managers, and I still have the same questions in the office. And I say to people, why can't you negotiate the way I do? And why can't you deal with people and deliver the way I do? And maybe that's a talent in itself. But yeah, so we never really planned to have a fully fledged construction business to work on third-party clients' assets. But that just sort of happened in terms of evolution, and I embraced that journey. So from us doing 95% work for myself, we now are doing sort of 20% of my projects and 80% clients' projects, and we're growing, rapidly on a monthly basis, and we're doing really well. So I'm quite blessed to be where we are, and the journey that we've been on over the last sort of 7, 8, 9 years has just been phenomenal.
So it has been great to see you grow, and it does make sense that once, that I'm always a big firm believer of momentum. So once you're doing something, and then people can see what you're doing, that momentum starts to compound, grow exponentially, and people want to be part of it. So it's no surprise to see where you've got to with it, coming from that beginning. In terms of the benefits of being a contractor, I mean, one of the things to me is that you can build everything at cost, which is what you've mentioned, the reason why you did it. What is a typical contractor margin for, because I know a lot of investors that they want to do things themselves, and they're always saying that, oh, it's 20%, it's 30%, it's 6%. If you look at Carillion, they were doing stuff on really tight margins, big numbers, but really tight margins. So how has that worked out?
So I think the delivery of information in construction is not as transparent as people would like it to be. And by that, I mean, you mentioned Carillion, where they say 6% margin, they've over marked up all of their works so that they've got another 6% in the works, plus a 6% overhead profit type model. But it varies across the board. So when we were starting up, and even till today, our business is purely based on volume. So we're not here to make 30% margins. We're very comfortable with 10, 15% margins, but we do double the amount of projects as other people would. So we get in and get out as quickly as possible. I say that, and then my colleagues are going to be laughing at us thinking about all these dodgy projects that we have been dragged on and on and on. And unfortunately, that does happen in construction. And that's where you can lose a lot of money. You can lose a lot of money because you deal with clients that are not prepared. they're midway through their project and they change things, or they haven't decided on items, but that's part and parcel. I often say construction projects are as good as the client. If the client is easy, the job will fly. If the client is difficult, the job will drag. But in terms of margins, I always used to say to myself, well, how is it that this firm can be charging double the amount that I would be charging on a similar type job? How do they get away with that? There's no price benchmark, unfortunately, and we use the BCIS book for rates in terms of what things should cost.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could put a project out to tender, and that book kind of goes out the window because people will charge what they can get away with, and you will pay. Unfortunately, as customers have a price in their mind, and
Yeah.
they think that is the price, and that's where you have that disconnect.
They have a price in their mind as to what they want to build it at,
Yeah.
not necessarily what it costs to build it at.
And you could build a scheme out for £1,000 a square meter, but you could also build a scheme for £4,000 a square meter. I always use the analogy of a car, and somebody says to me, well, how much is it going to cost for a car? Well, it depends on what car do you want. Do you want a coupe? Do you want a Fiat? Do you want a pickup truck? Well, what do you want here? Each one has its own price. And the same thing is when you want to build a house or an extension or a loft conversion is, what do you want to put in there? There is a massive difference between a slate roof and a concrete large tile roof, or a plain tile roof, or a clay roof. And there's so many variations that you can't throw a square meter figure out there. That's just a guide for you to maybe appraise a project and say, well, your average scheme will cost you £2,000 a square meter. But it's all about, the government and the council nowadays have put in so many carbon targets and landscaping requirements and glazing requirements and so many different requirements. Now you've got fire safety requirements, and these have all added more costs. And we often have that battle where I believe we price up jobs quite well, and you'll have other contractors who maybe missed a few things, and we come out looking like we're expensive. But really, when you drill it down, you think, oh, the other contractors have just missed a lot of things, or they're not experienced enough in pricing.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges and risks, and something that I must admit that I'm not, fully up to speed with. And I don't think many people are. If you're not in the construction business, you look at 3 different quotes. How do you know everyone's quoting like for like? So the way that I always go about it is that you get all of your architect drawings, you get your M&E drawings, you get a full scope of works, and then you send that out to 3 different contractors, and you're hoping that they're going to quote against the same thing. But even then, maybe the contractor hasn't missed something.
Get surprised. Yeah. You get surprised. And, we're human beings, right? So we're prone to make mistakes. I think doing it the way you've done is the right way. Unfortunately, sometimes you get a lot of clients that they throw you a set of planning drawings and say, hey, how much is this going to cost? Well, there's no detail here.
There's no structural engineering calculations.
So what do you want me to price this on? I can give you a square meter, but it means nothing. And really, people need to invest in drawings, engineers' drawings, schedule of works, know what you want before you even speak to a contractor. And in some cases, depending on the size of the scheme, employ a QS or have a contractor administrator to really, or employer's agent to look after you and your interests, because they're more clued up. Some people think, well, am I really going to spend 5 to 10K on an employer's agent? But it's when something goes wrong, that becomes the most cheapest investment you've made. So whilst I'm not an advocate, there's a lot of employer's agents that are not up to scratch. I do believe that where there are developers or wannabe developers who think that they are clued up enough in what they want, actually they don't know what they want. And unfortunately, there's a massive segment of builders that will come in cheap to win the contract, but they actually make their money from variations. And that really hurts people like us, because we're trying to transform that image to say, look, we're going to price up a job for you for what's on the tin. Other contractors will charge it cheaper and know that midway they'll say, well, I never priced for that. Here's a variation. And unfortunately, you get pushed into a corner. For us, it's all about relationships. And that is what I take from my banking career, if you like, is you're only as good as your relationships. I would only get hired and moved on to another company or be able to apply for another job because what is the book of clients that I'm going to bring to the table? And that's the same whether you're in recruitment, whether you're in lending, whether you're in anything, is what are you bringing to the table? Don't tell me you've got a degree or you've got a good CV. I need you to join my business and grow my business. So what are you bringing here? And in construction, unfortunately, this type of variation business is really where people kill relationships off.
Sure. I always say that you go cheap and it ends up costing you more. And I think
All
that
day long.
the only way really to be sure to mitigate the risk is to really have a really detailed data room, a tender pack to be able to send to a contractor and get three reputable, credible experience. They've done that job 3 times before. So if you're building a block of 9 flats, they've already built one before. If you're building just a loft conversion, they've done a loft conversion. If they're building an extra unit on a rooftop, they've done that before. And then you can feel that they already done that. They knew what the costs were, so they can kind of look at what you're trying to do here and come up with a fairly accurate. So I in fact always put the onus on the investor or the developer if the build costs are wrong, not so much on the contractor, because the contractor is pretty much just working with what information that they've been given, the good ones at least. You've mentioned 2 things though, BCIS and employer's agent. I'd like you to just tell, some people might not know what BCIS is, for example.
Neither do I, but it sounds good. So BCIS is basically a rates book that tells you what your average rate for laying a floor or building a wall or a roof or any item that, actually I've got one here. Sorry. Just to show you the viewers.
This is why you need to watch this on YouTube, by the way.
This book, which is massive, has rates on, you name it, it's got it. And it presents the information on a square meterage base. It's just basically like a large paper-based Excel sheet that really allows people to be able to price up jobs, but also when there comes to variations, for somebody to turn around and say, well, this is what the rate is. Now, if you're plus or minus 10% from there, then you think, you know what, the contractor is on the right path. If you're charging double the money, then at least you have an argument to play to say, well, the national rate or the London rate for this type of element of works is this much. Can you please explain why your price is so much higher? Employer's agent is really somebody who you would hire to administer your contract for construction. Now, on the smaller extensions and refurbs, people would rarely use a JCT contract. I've become a big fan of them over the last few years. We used to have our own contract, but then I learned over the years, and I learned painful lessons from clients that we need to have a JCT contract, and we need to ensure that there is a contract administrator to not only protect the client, but also to protect the contractor and to ensure that things are administered. And it also acts as a buffer. I firmly believe in, and I've got some amazing clients that I work with. I mean, touch wood, I've been blessed, and part of my success is the fact that I've worked with really, really nice people along my journey. And because we build such good relationships, talking about money becomes difficult. So having an employer's agent who acts as a buffer to avoid any difficult conversations allows you to be able to speak to a third party freely. They can then regurgitate the information in a way that will allow the other party to absorb it better. And then you can agree things, and then you can go back to being mates again, right? So I think that's a real, and depending on the size of scheme, you're paying between anything from £3,000 to £50,000, depending on the size of the project. But it's when things go wrong that becomes a really cheap investment. So for those of you employer agents that have been funding me, that's what I think.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the BCIS, so it's a national database of costs, and they allow everybody to, because from an investment point of view, building large developments, looking at construction costs in different regions of the country, we look at it as a general price per square foot as a guide, not necessarily as a something that you hang your hat
Yeah.
on, but as a guide. But the book that you've got there, is that like published once a year, or because
Yeah, so
everything
it
all
gets updated. It gets updated annually.
yeah,
Although I would say to anybody who buys them now to throw them away because today, if anybody's been following the news, the costs have gone through the roof.
yes, I was about to ask you about that.
So this book means nothing today because there's a number of incidents that have impacted construction labor costs as well as material costs, and it's put contractors. I think in the coming weeks and months, you're going to see a lot of noise of happening where either contractors go bust
Yeah,
or because contractors are going to walk off jobs because they can't. There's no profit in there for them. And unfortunately, the only people, I think it will sort itself out because naturally, if construction costs go up, developers still want to make their margin. So the GDV price is just going to get shifted up because the for sale asking prices will go higher. So ultimately, our first time buyers and our people who are looking to invest in schemes are the ones who are going to pay the penalty at the end
yeah,
of the day. Um, and the government, I'm sure, will put together another help to buy types fiasco that's again inflating, and these sort of things are what inflate construction costs. But to come up on this price hike, so you've had Brexit, you've had COVID, and you've had the blockage of the Suez Canal. Now those three factors have really driven up construction cost materials over the last 3 months. Timber prices have gone up 60%, cement prices are double,
wow,
steel have gone up 80%. Plastics is in a shortage. Um, labor has gone up because I think, coupled with lockdown and Brexit towards the tail end of last year, a lot of people left. I'm talking about London. The streets are quieter. While there still is traffic, my school run used to take me 40 minutes, and now I make it in 15. There's not enough cars on the road. Now, I put that down to a lot of Europeans going back to their home countries because of lockdown and Brexit,
yeah,
uh, and not many of them applying for settled status in the UK. And also COVID, with the lockdowns, people thought, well, if I'm going to be locked down and can't go anywhere, I'd rather go back to my home country and be with my family.
sure,
That had
yeah,
an
absolutely,
impact. And the Suez Canal blockage has just, really affected shipping costs. So if anybody wanted to import anything east of Turkey, your shipping costs are now double because there's just a backlog of ships that got stuck in that canal. So steel is where steel is imported. Back in the day, steel was all made here, but now it's all imported. Costs have gone up, shipping costs have gone up. Anything you want to buy from China, it's just massive delays. And I don't see that correcting itself, actually. What I believe, maybe steel might, but things like timber, cement, plastics, once the new benchmark of price has been set, things rarely go down.
yeah.
And unfortunately, people who invest in property are the ones that are going to suffer for those prices.
And as you say, it's the first time buyer, the end user, that will, in the end, suffer the most.
Yeah.
I think with the construction costs going up, I've noticed a lot of developers, when they're doing their appraisals, they put in 10% contingencies rather than 5% for new build, which
Yeah,
is typical, maybe just over a year ago. So there are other things as well you can do to make sure your project's profitable. I think, again, landowners, the landowners who are selling their sites, the GDV may not go up so much. The build costs are what they are, so therefore it just puts a downward pressure on the land value as well.
yeah.
So they're probably likely to suffer from it. Um,
Will encourage more people to build to rent. If the GDVs don't go up, the build to rent has more momentum and people will just refinance their assets, rent them out, keep the asset, refinance, do another scheme.
yeah, hang on to it for a little bit longer and wait till the market comes back up, which is always a beautiful thing about property
Yeah,
development, is that you don't necessarily crystallize a loss until you sell, and you can just refinance, especially if you're low leverage, and then just wait for and then live off hopefully a decent little income, especially with interest rates so low.
exactly. Exactly.
What are the negatives of being a contractor? I remember many moons ago, I think it was the first time that we met, you told me that the carpenter's house has no doors.
Yeah.
And I had to ask you, what does that actually mean? And you
Don't
told me, and it makes
don't
complete
ask my
sense.
wife. Don't ask my wife. Yeah. So we've got a dental practice, and there's been a plan to refurb elements of it for the last 3 years. And every week it's yes, honey, next week, next week, next week. And unfortunately, as somebody in the construction industry, you do neglect your own because your customers come. Well, I can only speak for myself. My customers come first and foremost, and we try our best to ensure that we try to deliver um, for them the product on time, but they take priority over anything. Unfortunately, contractors, builders, people in the trade, you've seen loads of shows of cowboy builders or my builder ripped
Yeah.
me off, and you get all these wonderful videos of my builder doing this to me, or where they get away with things and not putting weep vents in and they just put it in like just for show, and there's loads of things that come up. So there is definitely a segment of people that want to cut corners. I do believe they're the minority, and I do believe that the pitfall of construction is the fact that people are so desperate. It can be very lucrative, but people are so desperate to get into it that you're competing on price all the time. You're not competing on quality. You're not competing on service. You're not competing on product. And when my partner Hussain and I set up Byoot, it was really about, we need to give the best user experience to the contractor, to the homeowners or to the developers. We need to make sure that we do not become builders. We need to ensure that we provide people that unique user experience, because most developers, homeowners, they come from professional backgrounds and they want to be spoken to on that level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, not to paint everybody with the same brush, but essentially that's what does happen in construction. Everybody is second guessing you. There's a lack of trust in the sector. There's a lot of, even tradesmen when you hire them. So I pay a lot of my staff on a full weekly basis. I'm unable to hire people because they want to get paid weekly or fortnightly. And I'm like, well, in the real world, everybody gets paid on every month. But in construction, there's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of non-payments. There's a lot of defaults that happen. So these are all little things that we have little challenges with.
Yeah. Managing cash flow, managing clients. It's just,
Before construction, I had hair.
ah,
I had
I mean,
locks
that was
like
mine.
you. I had locks like you back in the day.
I mean, yeah, I mean, with every industry, with every business, every job, there's always going to be pitfalls. But I mean, that does make sense. I think that the clients. So this is actually a question that I had for you as well. The clients that are developers and investors, they're hell bent on hammering you down on price because every saving that they make, every penny is a
Yeah,
profit for them.
yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, you might have, let's say, a wealthy Chelsea homeowner where money is no object. And, I want my cinema in my basement and I don't mind how much it's going to cost me because I've got 5 homes around the world and this is what I want. And, I want just somebody that I can enjoy their company and know that they're going to do a good job. So they'll probably pay you above, the margin is going to be significantly different. Who's like, because I know on the same, pretty much the same question, doing a loft conversion and a side extension compared to some of the now very large developments, new build developments that you do, there's a different type of person you're working with. The kind of retail homeowner to the commercial investor. Who do you prefer working with and why?
I, well, I've got mixed answers if I'm honest, but just to touch on that point. So I've made it a massive priority in our business to not charge people based on their postcode. We charge for the detail that you require. And unfortunately, I've lost out to business to those guys in Chelsea and in nice, fabulous homes that want to be paying £2 million for a refurb that should be costing them £500,000. And unfortunately, it's weird, right? How can you be too cheap? And I agree, but I can't charge you just because you've got a Lamborghini outside your house and you've got money for it.
He probably thought
So
you were going to come up with loads of variations.
yeah, So, we're very clear in terms of our breakdown and how we say to people that the job costs what it costs. We charge you a bit extra if the logistics are hard. We'll charge you a bit extra if the site has different constraints, or if, you've got handmade coving that is required in there. If you've got fancy stuff, you pay for the fancy stuff. But a build is a build, whether you're in Chelsea or whether you're in Wembley. And that has been something that we've struggled with. And similarly, some people will say we're more expensive. But in terms of what kind of clients you want to deal with, I think from a business and a commercial perspective, we love dealing with young, hungry, growing, ambitious developers because it's repeat business.
Yeah.
We know we will deliver well, and these guys will rarely find people like us. And for us, it's easy. You build a relationship once, and you're going to keep on doing repeat projects with this individual. Similarly, with but those developers are also quite cutthroat and aggressive, and they just want to drive a hard bargain and get the best price. So again, it comes down to volume. If you're going to be doing repeat business with an individual, you can't price him the same way as a one-time customer. The one-time customer, or the homeowner, if you like, they are fantastic to deal with because you get to learn about people. And I've got this wonderful client who we done a refurb for their flat for, and she's just so full of praise, and she's just so nice to speak to. And I don't speak to her as often as I'd like to, but she knows that even though we've grown and developed, whenever she's got a problem, no matter how big or small, she'll pick up the phone to me because she trusts me. And she won't go on to Check a Trade or anywhere else. She will go and say, I'm going to call Marwan because he's going to give me the best sound advice. And those are relationships that you kind of build for life. Even though you don't physically meet and talk regularly, you have those bonds and those connections. Whereas with developers, it's more transactional.
Yeah.
But from a commercial perspective, it's repeat business. So we want those guys. So there's positives and negatives with each people that you deal with.
And you don't turn your nose up at one or the other. You just look at it on a case by case. Do I want to work with that person? And is the contract value big enough to make sure that it's worth my while?
So thankfully, with the blessings of God, we have grown. 5 years ago, I would beg to win a job for a loft conversion. I'd beg for it. I want to win that loft. Today, a loft is too small. And that, for me, we have a saying in Arabic, there is no job that is to feel disrespected by. There is a place for everybody in life.
Sure.
If everybody was a doctor, then nobody would clean the streets, right? So there is a space for the sole trader builder. There is a space for the SME contractor. There's a space for the medium size, and there's a space for the large ones. And each one has their respective clients. And we've thankfully, over the last, say, 2 years, transitioned from being the small builder to a medium-sized contractor now. And we want to grow and establish ourselves in that space. One of the unique things for us is we don't subcontract any work out. Or I'd say we don't. I don't want to lie. We very rarely subcontract work out because I like to retain control. I need to know who's going, when, how, where. And unfortunately, when you've got too many subbies on a job, you lose that control. And I'll say to my PMs and I'll say to the project manager, well, why is your brickwork not carrying on? Oh, he didn't turn up. Why not? I don't know. And you're not in control. Whereas I've got my own plumbers, electricians, builders, roofers, decorators. Wherever there's a requirement, I send them there, and I'm in control that in those hours, they're mine. I can control that, where they're going to go and how to, if I need to pull people off one job to speed up another one, or if I've got a delay on one job and need to pull people off, they can go and work somewhere else. So whilst that's a huge, daunting task in terms of wages and cash flow for us, having that control gives me a bit more peace of mind when I want to go to sleep at night.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. Now, I want to talk as well about the construction methods. There's a lot of modern methods of construction, things like light gauge steel, SIP panels, compared to things like block and brick, timber frame. Where do you have a preference? I mean, do you get involved in stuff like light gauge steel, SIP panels, or
Yeah.
You know,
So actually, today, I've just confirmed two projects orders for light gauge steel frames. Um, we've previously done two timber frame schemes. The majority of our work is traditional brick and block. Um, I'm leaning towards working more, depending obviously on the scheme and the suitability, but I am starting to become a fan of light gauge steel. I think whilst it's not necessarily cheaper, it saves you a lot of time on site. That
yeah,
if that frame goes up, and whilst it's a lighter frame, it means you save a bit of money on the foundations, but it also means that you get to clad the external skin of the brickwork or the render or any type of cladding that you require on the external leaf. At the same time, you'll be able to do your roof or your M&E, and you can have multiple things going on at the same time. Whereas with the traditional builds, you'll build the ground floor, put the steels in, put the joists in, then build the next tail and the next lift, and then you'd have to get it weather tight and then start your first fixing. So where you use a light gauge system, you'll be able to erect the frame much quicker, but at the same time that you're cladding it and closing it off, you then be able to start your first fixing. So it buys you a lot of time, and less time on site means less prelim costs, less tradesman costs, and then the quicker you're in and out, you move on to the next project. So I am, you know, timber frame is good, but I'm finding that if I was the price point between timber and steel, there's not much in it. And with all respect to all the timber manufacturers out there, my personal opinion is that timber is an inferior product to steel, just to movement, weathering, expansion,
sure,
contraction,
sure. I mean, if you got a fire, one's going to burn down
fire
to the ground.
safety. So you got the whole fire safety thing, and that's another that deserves another video in a call in itself. To all these fire regs that have come up for me is a lot of money making business. Um, but yeah, I think light gauge steel is the future. I believe
Yeah,
as these prices have now increased more and more, modular off-site builds as much as possible that you can crane into site is the way forward. Pods and things like that, I think, are going to come more and more of the norm. Maybe not so much in London, because you don't have the space to play around and put cranes everywhere and build in that way. But outside of London, on new housing schemes, I think that is going to be the way forward.
makes sense. Have you ever thought about these modular construction off-site stuff? You know, one of the next evolutions of Byoot would be to have your own factory somewhere where you're literally just building stuff off-site and then delivering it, because that's happening. I mean, have you ever thought about getting involved in any of that?
I'm not sure if that will become a thing in my generation. Whilst it started, I don't believe it will become the mainstream for the next 50 years. What I do believe is that there is a market for it,
Sure.
and you've got all these retro hippie cool kind of guys. They don't tick my box at all. They want that kind of stuff. You want to have this funky pod in the middle of a farm and a field, and it sticks out like a sore thumb, but it appears on Grand Designs. So so there is a place for everything. I wouldn't say that I'm convinced in the technology yet, although there's all this talk about 3D printed houses and stuff like that, which yeah, there is that market. I don't know if the more ultimately it's about, can you get finance on it, and will the
Yeah,
mortgage
I must admit, I'm very excited to see how the whole 3D printing house goes. I think that there's loads of other repercussions with the industry as well, because if you can print a house at 50 grand that normally is going to cost somebody 150 grand, how does that work within the industry, and what does that do to property prices? And but it is very exciting technology, which brings me nicely onto technology,
Yes.
because you've got a technology app
Yes.
called Skrap,
Correct.
which launched. When did it launch? What's it about? Tell us all about it.
So Skrap is, if you like, a brainchild of our construction business. Thankfully, and I should say this, I wouldn't be able to grow and leverage myself without having a great team with me, and that stems from Jelu, my construction director, to my partner Hussain, to my wife, to Andrew, to a number of people in my businesses have really allowed us to scale, and I leverage those people to help us grow, and I lean on them significantly. One of those four that we were talking about is still with me today, and that for me is a great sign, because people in construction especially, there's a huge turnover of staff. There's no loyalty in this business. Somebody offers you £10 more, he's gone. Sorry, I'm not coming to work anymore.
Wow.
So, I reciprocate with everyone that I believe gives me, I give back, and I give back, in tenfolds, if you like. So Hussain and I, we used to do projects in Luton, in Ascot, in Guildford, in Wembley, and it was becoming really painful for me to be able to do this admin of trying to find a skip supplier in Luton and a skip supplier in Ascot, and when is he coming? What's the best price? What's the service levels? Oh, he didn't turn up. Why? Have that call. I said to him, imagine if there was an Uber for skips and grabs and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it would be amazing. No headache. You know what the price is. Book it. You know when he's coming. So he said, yeah, it would be. So I said, well, let's build one. So, and it was a laugh, actually. But I called up one of my best friends who I went to university with, and he has a software house in Pakistan. And I called Ahmed up and I said, look, I've got this idea and I want your help to build it. That conversation developed, and in fact, he came and moved his family back to the UK to lead the commercial operations. We set up Skrap in 2018 as essentially your Uber for skips and grabs and cages, to solve that problem for main contractors, small contractors, medium contractors, homeowners who don't know what the price of a skip should be, who don't know how to get a grab supplier or ready mix concrete. And the product has evolved over the last 3 years. But we Hussain done immense great work at delivering on the technology side and building the app and getting the app working and growing the team. And between us, we really have caught on to something which I feel is such, construction and technology. Whilst there's a lot of talk about BIM and being the future for construction, it's not a great, it's not sexy enough for big investors. And that's a problem with construction. So people will invest in, bricks and mortar and assets and land and things, but they don't necessarily invest in software for construction or product. So we struggled initially with funding, and Hussain done a fantastic job of building our network pool of investors. And our first raise at startup level, the seed level, and then we raised £1 million, and we've just closed another £1 million round, and we've got some really good investors that have come on board, and we've got a nice runway for the next sort of 18 months. We've got an office full of 25 people, and it's growing from strength to strength. And really, we captured a gap in the construction sector. How many builders waste their time trying to find a skip, waiting for the skip, booking a skip, or a grab lorry, or ready mix concrete, or plant hire? Now you can do it for the few clicks of your button. Invoice is there, it's paid on your card, or you got a credit facility, and it's job done. So it very much is like Uber for skips, and that's growing really well. We plan to take that international. I mean, we are national now in the UK. We serve all the major cities, and we're looking to grow that exponentially. We've hired some amazing talent from industry, experienced people. And the best part is, the main core of the team shares the vision, and they're all like-minded individuals that are hungry to be part of something that is incredibly scalable. So we want to, the plan was this year to go and open up in Germany. There's a massive market for construction in Germany, and Germany's a beast of its own. But COVID put, we didn't know whether we'd be able to have this conversation a year ago. We didn't know it was like Armageddon. So COVID put the brakes on a little bit, but I think we're going to re-energize and try and think about our scalability and how we can go into the US, how we can go into Europe before somebody else comes to market and tries to copy what we're doing. But we've built up a fantastic product. So please do download the app and share it with your network, because I think it will be If every I think the retention of our users is fantastic, because people who use it, they're like, how come I've never known about this before?
What this kind of technology is, I think it's a great idea. And I did introduce somebody to it back in 20, I think it was 2019, kind of, and they were like, "Wow, this is a phenomenal idea," because yeah, I have this problem all the time, and they're literally phoning around local people to try and see if they can come. It just revolutionizes things in the same way that Uber has for
Awesome.
cabs. It just totally makes sense, and it is a great business because anything tech is usually super scalable. I mean, you've
Yeah,
mentioned Europe, you mentioned US, certainly across Asia as well. I think that
yeah,
there's going to
yeah.
be a huge demand for this kind of thing. So yeah, am I? You mentioned it. It's probably you've got to scale it before somebody else comes in and copies it. Before Uber, for example, copy
Yeah, yeah. So,
Deliveroo.
people, it's interesting when we talk about entrepreneurship and people, founders of businesses, and every investor you speak to, they say, well, what's your exit strategy? And I often think to myself, well, that means that investor is here clearly just to make an investment and not to be part of something big. I don't think about exit. Whilst you can say, we'll get you out in the next funding round, or we're going to IPO, we're going to, exit in that way. We want to build a global business, and we have the opportunity to build a global business, because if you look at any country in the world, from the the desert in Africa to the beaches of Florida, from anywhere, and then even in the North Pole, property is the one big driver of all economies in every country. And to grow properties and to build properties, you need construction. And within that construction, you'll have waste. So this is a product that's going to be out there for everyone throughout the world. Um, the way things are done in the UK is a heavily regulated industry with different landfill taxes and contamination and asbestos and plasterboard, and tomorrow it's going to be MDF. And the industry is heavily regulated than it is in maybe some Asian countries, but that will just happen with time. But we have the opportunity to grow massively. So I don't think about the exit. I think about how do we get all over the world before anybody else, take out the market, because Uber, the beast in the car hire business, what they've done, if they've created, other people have copied the same model, and Uber are well backed and they just buy out the competition. So some people just set up businesses for Uber to buy them.
I was going to say that could be an exit as well. I think that you are right to have just a focus right now that I want to grow.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about exit. I'm thinking about growing. I'm thinking about taking up market share. And then the exit will start to show, appear for itself. Where are we going to go? The competitors are going to come in with offers, and we're going to see whether we want to take those offers or take more investment and to grow to the next level.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense.
And I think testament to the team that we have at Skrap. I mean, when we first started, we leveraged some of the main suppliers that we worked with at Byoot. And one of them who supported us from day one, Gowing and Percy, wonderful skip supplier. Don't use them, use us. Um, they came on board and they supported us with pricing and with service. And I promised them within 12 months, we'll be in their top 5 of their customer base. 9 months in, we used to have a meeting every quarter, and 9 months in, we were pleased to know that we were part of their top 3, spend in customers. And that for me was a fantastic achievement that we'd managed to do in 9 months worth of trading. We've grown from strength to strength, and everything that we, any profit or any, revenue that we get in, we are plowing back in to hire more amazing talent to grow this business. And, people will open up and do a search on your, but I have this challenge, with funding, and people say, well, your business isn't doing so well. And I said, well, why? We're growing. Look at our turnover. We're reinvesting every single thing that we do. And unfortunately, some people look so two-dimensional at financial accounts of people, and they miss out on some really good opportunities because they just look at black and white numbers and not look at what's beneath the surface.
Hey, there's some
So
great stories of these people that turn down Airbnb, or they turn
yeah,
down, they turn down all sorts of investments, Facebook included, and they say it's never gonna catch on, and those things blow up. So at the end of the day, you'll always find the right investor, I think. Well, you'll find an investor, whether it's the right one, that's down to the shrewdness of your judgment. But I'm very confident in everything that you do has kind of worked out for you. I had a lot more questions that I wanted to go through. So I'm gonna try and wrap up on a couple of questions, because we've been speaking recently, and there's all kinds of people watch this. But one of the things that you mentioned to me recently was something that helped you grow, was starting out with these HMOs, with these income generating assets, and that foundation of getting some cash flow in to be able to sustain a minimum standard of life, and then
Yeah.
propel yourself from there. I thought that was good advice. Now, the question is, you're obviously a property person through and through. What does it take to become a successful property person, to be a property people?
I think the title of your show, Property People, really sums up the main thing. People like people. We are social animals, and I have this battle with my colleagues about working from home. Businesses can't grow with people working from home, because people need people to develop and grow and provide you that dopamine, and there's all of these, whilst there is an element of people working independently, you need teams, and you need to have a partner, you need to have somebody who can share your vision or be a critique even. But I think the main it's really hard to answer that question, because unfortunately, and you're going to have to excuse me, you can edit this if you want to, but there are so many wonderful characters on the internet who come up with, I've become a millionaire at 25, come and JV with me, I'm an Amazon bestseller. I know we're dragging on, but I'm going to tell you a quick story. I'm going to tell you a quick story, a real life event. I applied, there's a website called My Builder that I used to get construction leads from.
Yeah, I used to use that as well.
Yeah. So it was fantastic. Somebody put up a job for a loft conversion in Northwood. I went to meet him. He loved my knowledge on property and planning and design and structure, and he said to me, "You should meet my son-in-law, and you guys should talk." And I was like, "Well, who's your son-in-law?" And he mentioned the name. I won't say the name. He's an Amazon bestseller. And I was like, "Okay." And I left from that meeting, and we exchanged a few emails with the client, and I found out who the son-in-law was. And I was like, well, it's just interesting how people can be so on such a pedestal in the property space, but their own family wouldn't use them as people for property knowledge, because it's just a front, and they're just great at marketing themselves. I could write a book tomorrow, and I reckon I would write a really good book tomorrow, and that's probably one of my mistakes that I haven't done. But but it seems to be the flavor of the last few years that everybody that has built an extension is now writing a book about being a property expert, and that really causes a lot of distastefulness for me. There are people that come up and say, well, I was doing multi-million-pound developments all over East London, and now I'm living out of IKEA furniture. There are people who have done multi-million-pound and they're bankrupt. And I went to a networking event, and I met some wonderful people, which I thought were wonderful people, and they were just fraudsters trying to do JV deals with people who didn't have money. They didn't have money. And when you scratch beneath the surfaces, you realize that all these people either trying to sell you training or trying to sell you JV deals or get property with no money down. Listen, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no money down. It happens to the very few. Don't try and sell people £10,000 worth of marketing material that you can just get from a Google search, and there's loads of these guys. So, good for them. They've done better than me in terms of marketing, but I don't, there's no credibility in there.
I can see you've got a bugbear that you're getting off your chest, which is great. But what I would say is, I know that you've worked with good people that you do respect and that kind of thing. So of those people, what is it do you think that made them as successful and as good as credible and as long-standing as they are?
I think people with a long-term vision, not short-term. There's none of this get-rich-quick business. It's not Bitcoin. Property is a long approach. I've mixed up my property flavors with doing HMOs in areas that have good capital gains. So I benefit from high-yielding assets, but also capital gains and growth. And I think I work with hungry people, young, hungry people that want to establish that, and smart. They've got to be smart. And that's really who I tend to work with, people that have ambition. You might not know, or you might not have the best experience, but you've got the hunger and the desire and the growth to want to deliver. And I've got two members of my staff, for example, who are becoming developers in their own right by working together. So those are sort of challenges, and those are the kind of people that I want to mix myself with. You know, the famous saying, your average of 5, and you are the average of those 5. So you really want to choose wisely who you want to be. Don't follow these internet personalities.
Very good. Marwan, you are a star. It's been incredibly insightful. Construction, I think, is one of the riskiest parts of property development. People literally lose their shirt by not building, costing things correctly, by not managing relationships on the construction. And a lot of people think property development is all about construction. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, with planning and buying right and that kind of thing. But construction is a huge part of it, because it's the tangible part that everybody gets to see, the huge success story. So you're in the heart of it and doing many other things. I know you even are a family man. You have business with your wife. You know, I don't know how you find time to do it all. Probably by not going to the networking meetings to meet all these people anymore. But I'm happy that we met at one of them, and that was always a good thing. So there are good things that come out of those things as well. I'm sure you'll agree. Where can people find you? I've been following you on Instagram lately, where you've had some really, really cool before and after photos and showing your portfolio of what you've been doing. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, get a quote from you, talk about Skrap and property and business, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I'm on all the social channels. You know, if you want to put my email on this, you can find me. My office is in Neasden in Northwest London. So we're around. Just search for Skrap, search for Byoot, search for Almas Dental. You know, we're active. We want to grow. We want to leverage. We want to be big. I can hear this, and one of my partners will be saying, "Yeah, have you got no more other companies to add to the list?" But no, we are very ambitious people, and I think that is what stimulates me, and you know, that's what I wake up for in the morning. I work 24/7, but I enjoy it. You know, I spend my time with my kids, I spend my time with my family, but my 9 p.m. till 1 a.m. is work, and I love it.
I can tell. It absolutely comes through. The last question, I should have asked it at the beginning. What does Byoot mean?
Byoot is homes for in Arabic. When I first started out, you know, I thought, well, the majority of my work is between my Arab network, and a lot of my clients are from the Middle East, and it sounded quite fitting. And then most of my people were not from the Arab world, so they all started calling it Byoot. So then I had to correct them without selling the whole Arab story. I said it Byoot is beautiful in Australian.
Yeah, you know, it's Byoot. You know, it is a beautiful name. I think you're good at coming up with names, to be honest, 'cause I think Skrap's also a cool name, especially the way you've spelt it. Thank you so much for joining us, Marwan. I hope that we can do this again in a year or two to see how you're getting on with everything, see where Skrap's got to, because I think everyone will benefit from it.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.